says one time she was sitting at the house, her mom had her friend over. Her mom always had her friend over. They were always smoking cigarettes and gossiping. They don't really pay any attention to her, just sitting at their feet, and they don't care that she's there. They just got to keep on with the story. There's always drama in the little town. Some boy comes busting up in the house, and he says, Miss Lynn, you gotta come, we've got trouble. And he was stricken. His face told the tale. She was only 4 when this happens, but she remembers it distinctly. And so she and her mom go tearing out of the house. The roads had just recently been repaved, and in her mind, she remembers running down the asphalt road that had just been laid down, hot tar sticking to her feet. That would have been a nightmare in and of itself, but that's hardly even thought of, because when they finally get to where the neighbor boy had led them, it was out to a field. Her brother, Brian, had been in a terrible 4-wheeler accident. She writes, they'd been trying to mow down some tall grass with their 4-wheelers. This seemed like a fantastic idea to them because they were idiots. Inevitably, they couldn't see one another through the tall grass and had a head-on collision. She said, I must have seen everything, heard Brian hollering in pain, my mother screaming in fear, but I don't remember any of that. I think God made me black out so I wouldn't remember the pain and panic and the sight of my brother's crushed body. A helicopter airlifted him to the hospital. She says, several days later, she went to go see Brian, who was in a full body cast. And she says, and I don't know why this struck me so funny, because it's not funny, but she says, from what I could see, he'd broken nearly every bone in his body. And the detail that drove it home for me as a kid was that he had to pee through a hole in the cast. She's funny. Anyway, she said that her parents were so grateful that he hadn't died that they eased their guilt over him having been in this accident because they weren't watching him by giving him everything he ever wanted. That they filled up his room with presents. If he said he wanted something, they bought it for him. And that deference to his wishes has continued to this day. He's still the favorite child, according to Britney. If he wants something, he gets it because the family was just so grateful that he survived. But she says that was sort of the negative thing that came from it. But the positive was that she and her brother became very close. And when he came home from the hospital, she wouldn't leave his side. And she said she slept on a mattress at the base of his bed, and that sometimes she'd just get in the bed with him. When he got better and the cast was off, she didn't stop sleeping in the bed with her brother. She slept in that bed with her brother till she was in 6th grade. And then her mom was like, Brittany, you got to get out of your brother's bed. And so she did. The thing is, she said she was just afraid to sleep by herself. The idea of being in her room alone at night frightened her. And I think what probably frightened her was because if she's alone, then she's there with all of her own thoughts, and then, all the chaos of life is going to come down on her, and she can't sing all night, which is the way she usually escapes bad thoughts. And so she was worried about it at first, although she did come to really enjoy having some space of her own. Life began to continue as normal. Once the brother began to become better, they continued to join into the community, and they just did, normal community things. And there were 3 parades a year. There was the 4th of July parade, the Thanksgiving parade, and the Mardi Gras parade. And, she would always be involved in all of it. She said that at one time she was in this group of kids. There was like 8 kids all hanging off a golf cart, and they were dressed up in costumes, and they kept hitting the car in front of them and got thrown out of the parade and all this. And this, at first I was like, I'm not going to include that story, whatever. But I did end up including it because I thought, no, it's important because that's what made life normal for her. That's what normalness looked like, just being part of the community parade and being in school play, playing basketball, all of this. She wants you to know it was normal at one point, that she lived a life that was normal, and that when she's getting into the music industry, there's this constant push me, pull me feeling. Because she wants to pursue becoming a megastar. She loves to perform. She feels good when she's doing it. But then at the same time, she wants to go back home to Louisiana to when things to normal life. And the truth is, she'd never really experienced wholesome normality. And so she's always trying to pursue something. It's either I want to go pursue being a megastar, but then I also want to go home, but I want home to I don't necessarily want home to be what it is right now, but I'd like to pursue it being a better version of what I've experienced. I want peace. I want it to be a safe place. And I felt safety at some points. And this, just like you and a bunch of your friends goofing off on a golf cart in the parade, is a snapshot of what she kept trying to get back to. When she would choose not to engage with being the megastar at first, as she's trying to figure out her way into stardom, there's a lot of times when she's got some pretty big opportunities. I shouldn't say a lot of times, but there's a couple times when she's got some pretty big opportunities that she lets them go because she wants just life. She just wants to do life. She's not necessarily looking to have every moment of her life driven by stardom. And in the end, she sort of loses the fight, because there's nothing normal at home, and there's pockets of normalcy, there's pockets of peace, but it's not consistent. So, why pursue that any longer? Chapter 4. She says that her father had started heavily drinking again, that when his gym business was going along pretty well, things were fairly successful for the family. But his business had started to fail, and so he turned back to the bottle. She said the stress of having no money was compounded by the chaos of my father's extreme mood swings. I was particularly scared to get in the car with my dad because he talked to himself while he was driving. I couldn't understand the words he was saying, but he seemed to be in his own world. That's a very terrifying little snapshot. To be with a parent who is out of control of themselves, I think, is one of the most terrifying things, because your parent should be in control. When you're a kid, you don't understand that your parents are human. They're supposed to be invincible. They're supposed to always have their act together, and of course they don't. But you want to believe that they can do no wrong. You want to believe that they're safe people. She says, I knew even then that my father had reasons for wanting to lose himself in drinking. He was stressed out at work. And now I see even more clearly that he was self-medicating after enduring years of abuse at the hands of his father, June. At the time, though, I had no idea why he was so hard on us and why nothing we did seemed to be quite good enough for him. The saddest part to me was that what I always wanted was my dad who would love me as I was. Somebody who would say, I just love you. You could do anything right now. I'd still love you with unconditional love. But my dad was reckless, cold, and mean with me. But he was even harder on Brian. He pushed him so hard to do well in sports that it was cruel. She said that her brother, Brian, was forced to do basketball and even football, even though he wasn't built for it. But his dad said to. She said my dad could also be abusive with my mom, but he was more the type of drinker who would go away for days at a time. And to be honest, it was a kindness to us when he went away. I preferred it when he wasn't there. What made his time at home especially bad was that my mom would argue with him all night long. She says that her dad would be completely laid out drunk. Like, he couldn't even talk. He was sick. He was incoherent. He couldn't even stand up. But Lynn would just stand over him and scream and scream and scream and scream and scream. And just all of the rage and all the indignation at being left to raise the kids would just pour out in vitriol. And Britney would come out in her nightgown and be like, leave him alone. He's sick. Just give him some food and put him to bed. And she would go back to bed and she'd just lay there just so angry with her mom because she was so tired and she wanted to go to sleep. But how could she go to sleep with all the screaming going on? And she writes, isn't that awful? He was the one who was drunk. He was the one whose alcoholism had made us so poor. He was the one passed out in the chair. But my mom was the one who ended up pissing me off the most because at least in those moments, he was quiet. I was so desperate to sleep and she wouldn't shut up. You know what I also think though too is that it isn't just that her mom was talking and that made her angry because she was tired. It wasn't just that her mom was screaming. But what good does it do for you to go to the parent who doesn't care, who's passed out so drunk he can't even hear you, even if you did care to tell him what you really thought. But even when he's sober, he doesn't care, because if he cared, he'd stop drinking. So you going and expressing all your indignation to the parent who's out of control doesn't do you any good, because they don't care and you know it. All of their behavior shows you that they don't care. So oftentimes the parent that is left doing most of the parenting ends up getting all the vitriol and anger and indignation from the kids because at least that parent cares. So if you tell that parent, I hate you, I hate everything that's going on here, I hate the fact that our family's like this, you can hope to have an impact with those words if you go to that parent. Even though they're the ones that, of the two, this is the parent that actually cares about you to some extent. They're going to get all of your wrath and indignation because they will hear it, and you can wound them. You can't wound the person that's really hurting you because they don't care enough what you say. But if I go to this person, maybe my words will land. Maybe I can, express my frustration. And if it falls short of the actual target, whatever. And you see that so many times in families that are just chaotic. The one that has to stay in the fight is the one that gets all of the anger, whereas the person that is just, peace out, I'm going to go do my thing. That's where all the anger should be directed. But what would the point be in that? So I know that she's angry at her mom for not being quiet, but I also think that the reason she sat there and was angry with her mom is because her mom is the one who she could maybe get to feel something if she expressed her anger. She says, in spite of all the nightly drama, by day, my mom made our home a place my friends wanted to come to. She says, our home was, for the lack of a better word, the cool house. We had a high bar with 12 chairs around it. My mom was a typical young Southern mom, often gossiping, always smoking cigarettes with her friends at the bar. She smoked Virginia Slims, the same cigarettes I smoke now. Or she talked with them on the phone. Interestingly, Britney says, I was dead to all of them. The older kids would sit in the bar chairs in front of the TV and play video games. I was the youngest one. I didn't know how to play video games, so I always had to fight to get the older kids' attention. Our house was a zoo. I was always dancing on the coffee table for attention. My mom was always chasing after Brian when he was little, jumping over couches trying to catch him so she could spank him for back-talking her. I was always overly excited, trying to draw the older kids' eyes away from the screen in the living room or to get the adults to stop talking to one another in the kitchen. Britney, stop! My mother would yell. We have company. Just be nice. Be on good behavior. But I ignored her. I would always find a way to get everyone's attention. See, that's what I'm saying. Britney, I have sympathy for why she was wilding out and why she was like a difficult child. Can you even imagine? That kid would drive you crazy. All the day long up in your face, always, dancing on the furniture. The only way she knows how to be seen, and at this point she has equated being seen with being loved, is to just be obnoxious all the time. And then the problem is that she desperately wants people's attention, but they don't want to give it. They're in the middle of something. So it's constantly her begging for attention and having people be like, stop it, stop it, stop it, And in essence, what she would hear is, I don't love you, I don't love you, I don't love you. So now she's going to have to up the game and actually be performing in a way that people that will stop and people will watch her. Her little coffee table dances aren't going to cut it now. So she's going to have to find a new way.